I'm just going to continue. This is also not going to be a Lego video. I guess, I don't know, this is going to be not as joined tangents as the last one was, and I didn't get a chance to talk about ick and people being that can trust your instincts. I don't know if I want to talk about that right now, so we'll see if it comes up in the tangents. And I'm not going to talk politics because it's just disheartening right now for the world. So I want this to be happier. Well, I won't say happier, just not as whatever. So Steve Shives, look him up. He's a Star Trek fan, as am I, but he makes money off of, he does whatever. I think he's a semi-professional actor. I'm not sure what his background is, but he does lots of Star Trek reviews and Star Trek talk and blah, blah, blah. One of his least favorite series is Voyager. And I fully understand why he says that. Voyager for me is ranking right up there with the top. But I understand the problems with it. I mentioned this before, but I always wanted, when I heard about Voyager, I said, oh, we're going to get a BSG Star Trek type thing where there's going to be a continuation, not necessarily a storyline across many, many seasons, but whatever happens to the characters in the ship in one episode will affect subsequent episodes. Like the original BSG was going to be that, but it wasn't. But what the reboot did fantastically well, I was hoping that was going to happen in Voyager, and it didn't. Overall, there was very, very little character growth across the 7 seasons. 7's character grew fantastically well, so they had that. But and Janeway, I thought, became a much better well-rounded captain, especially after her hair came down. That's not a sexist thing. I'm just saying that there's a difference between Catherine Janeway with the bun and Catherine Janeway without the bun. For me, she became more nuanced and less stringent and rigid, but she was still by the book, which came out in a whole bunch of episodes, and especially with Equinox. I thought that was a brilliant little thing going on for Star Trek, the Equinox Voyager. I thought it was brilliant to see the difference of styles of captains, and when you're put under, they say, the crucible of whatever, to burn off all the extraneous, the irrelevancies, and see who you fundamentally are. And Janeway, being out in the Delta Quadrant in Equinox, showed herself to still adhere to and believe in Starfleet and the Federation of Planets and the Starfleet values, and to promote that in the Delta Quadrant, whereas Equinox went completely the other way and became very, very pirate-ish, shall we say, whatever. I thought that was a brilliant couple episodes there with Equinox. Very, very well done. It's what I think was, for me, that was peak Voyager. And because I believe it was a 2-part or maybe a 3-part, I can't remember now, it's been a while since I've seen it. I was hoping the entire series would be like that there'd be the continuation of problems, and they'd have to, in subsequent episodes, fix those problems that happened episodes before. I was told the Year of Hell was supposed to be the season, which would have been fantastic, even though there's a lot of fans out there who can't stand reset episodes. And I get that. I really do get that you're emotionally invested in the what's going on in the happenings of the episode, and people die, and things get blown up, and how are they going to get over this? And all of a sudden, Q snaps his fingers, or they go through a time warp, or whatever, and all of a sudden, everything's tickety-boo. That was the Year of Hell for Star Trek. But I was invested during that bottle episode. They call it the bottle episode because it resets right back to the beginning. It's stuck in a bottle. It never happened in reality in the Star Trek universe. But I was still emotionally invested, even though I knew there was going to be a reset at the end of it. I was, and having read from the 70s show as the guy, one of my favorite actors, I really loved the Year of Hell. I thought that was a fantastic season cliffhanger, and picking up in the next season, and even that. So people say pinnacle Star Trek, best of both worlds, part 1 and 2. And yet some people also say part one was fantastic, like, Mr. Warfire, bum, 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 and you had to wait 2 months before you found out what happened. And then the second was just basically wrapping it all up. And even though I liked the second episode, the conclusion of Best of Both Worlds, I thought it was really, but Shelby wasn't arguing with Riker anymore. There was no tension. There was less tension in part two as the build-up of part one. And again, still fantastic as two bookends of a fantastic two-part episode. What I found with The Year of Hell, the first episode, fantastic, and the second episode was equally as fantastic. They didn't just bring down the tension and whatever until the conclusion and credits. I thought it was really good right up until the end. I thought so. I thought it was wonderful. I thought The Year of Hell was a brilliant two-part episode. I'm talking Star Trek because it's just in my head right now. Because, and this is related to my head, but nowhere in the talking, Gene Hackman just passed away. And there was some points in my head that went from whatever. And again, I'm going to be like, again, Steve Shives, who had a wonderful tribute to Gene Hackman today, posted. And I loved everything he said about it. Gene Hackman and our generation is the actor of actors. He'd be like the Jimmy Cagney from 40 years ago, or the Jimmy Stewart or whatever. Gene Hackman was our generations and generations here and there. That's there because we grew up watching movies with Gene Hackman in them. My first exposure, and I'm not going to go into the same thing and cover what Steve Shive said, but it was Superman. like I was 10 or 11 when Superman came out. But subsequently, I've seen like nearly all of his movies, even the ones he did before 1979. So that led me to think about Gene Hackman and the passing. He was 95, fantastic. I do not like other people. I'm not even going to jump on what happened. It's not. Nobody knows anything, and I'm not going to spread stupid things. The follow to that, and it really has nothing to do with this. So I'm sad that he's gone. I am very, very pleased that he left a legacy of utterly fantastic acting things for us to cherish for the rest of our lives. So thinking about Gene Hackman led me to Superman, led me to putting on my phone the theme to Superman 1. My friend Dave and I talked about this before, that it is my favorite, and this is even with Star Trek. It is my absolute favorite. It's just a joyous little piece of symphonic orchestra as the theme to Superman. Bum, ba, ba. It's like you almost hear Superman. It's like the name of the movie is built into the notes. It is that perfect. It is absolutely, and seeing it in the theater, I was a kid. Seeing it in the theater, and just the starting opening with the kid reading the comic books, the action comic books, you see the pod, and he's flipping the chat, and you hear the little kid talking about Superman, and then bum, 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 and the bass starts going, and it's like, seriously, the music was absolutely wonderful for Superman. Again, what's his name? Not Goldsmith, the other guy. Williams, fantastic for making music anyway, as we found out with Star Wars and everything else. So I was thinking about Superman and Lex Luthor, because he was fantastic as Lex Luthor. I mean, I've watched most iterations of Superman over my life, including the old black and whites with George Reeves and stuff. And I liked Brandon Routh, and I didn't, not to say this because, again, I think, whatever. I liked Kevin Spacey, but I found Kevin Spacey to be too, I'm going to say this, human as Lex Luthor, too brushing, as nonchalant, as shall we say, as Lex Luthor. Or Gene Hackman, you felt, as him playing Lex Luthor, you felt that even though he portrayed himself as human and rational and reasonable, but you just had that sense that underneath this thin veneer of that portrayal of a human being, a proper society-loving human being, that there was like just waiting to blow up. And that's what I got from Gene Hackman's portrayal of Lex Luthor. And then every Crimson Tide and all the other movies they did. I think one of my favorites, and even though I'm not talking about the other guy anymore, not Crimson Tide, Enemy of the State is forget the other guy who started it. It's a brilliant movie. I love that movie, and I love Gene Hackman in that movie. So I was thinking of Superman, and so I'm listening to the soundtrack to Superman, and then the my phone for the programming or whatever you call it, knowing my musical tastes of videos I watch, started playing Babylon 5 next. So I'm thinking about Star Trek. I'm thinking about, Gene Hackman passed away. Oh, Superman, I'm going to listen to Superman. And all of a sudden I'm hearing the Babylon 5 Sleeping in Light Suite. Now, to be said, there are some extremely, I'm a guy who wears my hat, I'm a guy who's always worn my heart in my sleeve. Ask my wife, and we had some, not trauma in the last couple of days, but we've had some emotional experiences the last couple of days that I won't dwell on right now. But it was nothing sickness in or whatever, nothing else like that. It's just that we had made a decision to do something, and that decision didn't work out for us. And thankfully, we were able to roll back that decision. But there was emotional consequences to that, and so there was a lot of tears because again, I will say that, okay, let's just give this the Coles Notes version. Friday passed away a bunch of years back. Friday, everybody says this about their dog. Friday was literally the best dog I've ever had. And this is saying something because I had lots of dogs growing up, and not necessarily my dog, family dog. And lots of my friends had dogs, and I loved all those dogs. There's not a single dog, besides the one that bit me in the butt when I was 6 years old. There's not a single dog on this planet that I've experienced that I did not like and or love. And so I grew up with wonderful dogs. Friday, Sandy and I got Friday. See, this is a tangent. We got Friday after we got married, but not to get into the nifty. We got Friday for a reason, and so we got Friday, and we had him, and then a year later we didn't have to worry about that reason because we had Josh. So but we had Friday because we had a reason for it, and again, I grew up with dogs, so we trained him but with all seriousness, it took me one day to train Friday to pee outside. A day. He was quiet, he was loving, he snuggled, he went for walks easy, he did his business without sniffing the entire neighborhood. Like, he was the easiest trainable dog. He was the easiest dog to live with. He didn't shed, which is fantastic. He was, for 13 and a half years, the easiest dog in the world for us to have in our house. He was never a problem, literally at all, even as a puppy. And we also had Sandy's mom living with us. So even when we went away, we didn't have to bring the dog because mom was home, and we never had to put the dog in a kennel or have somebody else dogs it. It was the easiest time to experience having a dog. And then Josh, the dog, fantastic. So anyway, but he passed away. So we've been honking and humming and hawing, and people, are you going to get another dog? Are you going to get another dog? Are you going to get another dog? And I'm going, there will literally never be another dog that I can ever find anywhere for any amount of money who is going to take the place of Friday, first of all, but second of all, be that easy for 13 and a half years, that easy. I've had dogs before, and I've seen dogs before, and I've loved dogs before, and yet none of them were ever that easy to be in our house with us. And easy to train, easy to walk, easy to do everything. So we're hemming and hawing for the longest time, and then all of a sudden, and we basically said, nah, we'll wait till I retire, and then I'll be home full time. We can take care of the dog easier. A friend calls us up and says, oh, I have a friend who, I won't say casually, breeds dogs, but it's not a dog breeder, but he decided to try his hand at it, and he breeds some dogs. He got a Shih Tzu and he got a poodle. and they had a litter, and they had another litter, and they had another 3 litters, and they sell off the puppies after a nice amount of time. So it's not coming from a dog farm or whatever else, one of those bad things. And he's close to home, so my buddy says, "Hey, they got dog. They got a dog that they don't want to sell because there was an issue with the dog. The dog's perfectly fine, but there was they couldn't sell it. They didn't want to sell it because then whatever. But they also have a whole bunch of dogs in the house. They didn't want to have the one more dog, and so they are looking for somebody to give this dog to for free." And I said, "Well, this is falling into my lap. Like, we've been talking about it, whatever." And so we called them up. They called him up and said, "Oh, it was a friend of a friend, blah, blah." They said, "Oh, come on up, see the dog." So we went up there on like Wednesday night to see the dog. And the 3 of us, Josh, me, and Sandy, saw the dog. And the dog, even though it was like 4 inches smaller, was basically identical to Friday. The same hairstyle, the same look, the same nose. Like, it was just Friday. and that's gonna, and the second I saw it, I'm like, this is gonna be, I mean, there was some other, because Friday was a white dog, and this one had some little brown patches, very, very, whatever, but it still walked like Friday, didn't bark, was pretty, and so we decided to tell them on Wednesday that we'll make the decision and get back to you. And they said, absolutely. So we went home and we talked about it, and they said, well, and they said at that point, you can have the dog, and if it doesn't work out, you can bring him back, because they love the dog already. The dog's 6 months old for them, and we should get rid of it because we got so many dogs, blah, blah, blah. But if it's going to a good home, that's fine. But if not, we'll keep the dog. So they said, if it doesn't work out for you, you can bring him back. So we called him up Thursday. He said, we'd love to have the dog. So we brought the dog home. And again, this wasn't because it wasn't easy, because the dog was fine. The dog was beautiful. It's a nice little 6-month-old puppy, soft and easy to snuggle with, and snuggling you, and and it was. They live up in a bunch of space up there, so the dog had never had a leash. They have a fenced-in backyard that's like huge. So the dog has been running around for the last 6 months. What I knew almost immediately when we brought him home is that this dog had free range for 6 months. Not only free range, but free range with like a half a dozen other dogs that he could play with. And you could, I mean, he wasn't hyper or anything like that, but he had, and so he was so happy when you see him running around the house when we went and saw him on Wednesday. And we brought him home, and he's not happy. The dog itself wasn't happy. It wasn't sad here, but it wasn't happy here because there's no other dog here to play with, and there was no outside. We had to take him on the leash. And the leash was like, again, pretty easy. Like, he's never had a leash on before, but I got a vest and a leash. The first 2 minutes, not good. But after a while, he walked with me. We walked around the block a bunch of times. So there was no problem with the dog. The dog was fantastic. And he's cute, and he's lovely and whatever. But he just, every time we stopped, he just kind of lay on the floor and whined because he's sitting there by himself. And I remember when we saw him at the house, he was just running around with all the other puppies and whatever else like that. So and then all night, Thursday night, he'd wake up and he'd whine because he'd be by himself. Even though he's with us, he didn't have his brothers and sisters and his mom and dad. And so it got into Friday morning, and we're having a problem. And to be also very, very truthful about this, wasn't just the like, it's not like, and he didn't bark. The dog was perfect, but he was just missing home. You could tell, and you can wait that out. You really can. I mean, the dog's gonna, after 6 months, he's not gonna remember home. He's gonna be fine with us. But I didn't want to do that to this dog. This dog had a very, very happy life up there. A very, very happy life up there. On top of which, from our personal point of view, it looked like Friday. And I'm gonna say, that made me a little misty, because it made me miss our dog, the one we had lost a few years back. And it was particularly hard on everybody else in the house, that this dog looked identical to Friday. And if it had been a different looking kind of dog, maybe it'd have been different, but it looked like Friday, and the mannerisms were like Friday. And every time he looked up, it looked like Friday. It's like, oh my God, it broke my heart. So we called him up, the house, the owners, and we said, I know you've said, is it true? Because like, we love this dog. This dog is wonderful. He's quiet and he's loving and he's considerate and whatever, and it's not going to take him too long to break in. But he is whining, and it's not like loud whining. He just misses his brothers and sisters. I felt it that he was missing his brothers and sisters. If you don't know anything about dogs, and most of us do know something about dogs, when a dog wags its tail, it's happy. And the dog, when it first came here, did not wag his tail. The tail was between his legs, and I know that means that it's upset or uncomfortable. As the night went through on Thursday, the tail started coming up, but it didn't wag. Friday morning when I'm taking him for a walk, he's wagging his tail a little tiny bit, right? And then, but he was still whining and whatever. And so I said to Sandy, what do you think? Josh, what do you think? Blah, blah. And they said, well, they're going to leave it up to me because I love dogs. And I said, look, this dog is wonderful. It could work out after months, but I don't want to hurt its feelings. And I know that we're having an emotional problem with having the dog that looks exactly like our old dog. So I think for all things considered, and the people who owned the dog were perfectly accepting to take it back. So I called them up. I said, this is what's going on. I said, oh, we understand. You can bring it back. Without any kind of ambiguity. So I didn't think that they're reading between lines or just humoring us. So we took it back yesterday. And we dropped off the dog. And the second the dog saw the house, and the second we opened the door and all the other dogs piled to the door, he was just the happiest dog ever. His tail's wagging back and forth, and they start running around the house again. And just like when we first met him on Wednesday. So it was the right thing to do, but it was emotional. Even after just 2 days of having the dog here, it was still emotional to me. That's me wearing my heart on my sleeve. I do get attached. I get attached very, very easy to these things. Now, again, I can let things go. I have let things go, but it's an emotional process. It's an emotional journey. So anyway, that's where I'm saying I wear my heart on my sleeve. So when I talk about Star Trek, to bring it back to Star Trek and Babylon 5. So I'm listening to Superman. I remember as Christopher Reeves passed away years ago. Gene Hackman just passed away. It's very sad. But 95, fantastic life the guy had. And so then all of a sudden, this Babylon 5 Sleeping in Light Suite shows up. Now, again, nobody out there has to watch Babylon 5. I'm one of the few people that ever watched Babylon 5. As I said, I used to watch everything science fiction. Any little thing that was science fiction, I would watch it. Up until about 2000. Then it just bursted out with all the new CGIs, and you can make anything. I still, and I know people hate me for this, I still haven't seen The Expanse yet. I get it. I want to see it. All the people whose opinions I really appreciate when it comes to science fiction love The Expanse, and they said, oh, it's like Firefly and Babylon 5 and blah, blah. So I'm gonna watch it at some point. I know I'm going to. But anyway, so up in about 2000, I'd like to think I've seen every single science fiction show, movie, whatever. And so I have a very, very, Star Trek's a way of life for me. Star Trek's not just a television show. Star Trek. Anyway, Star Trek is not a way of life, but I like to say it's a way of life. Star Trek is a fundamental building block of me. And I love it. I've loved it since I was 4. And probably even before that, but I remember watching shows with my brother. Babylon 5 came along. I mean, we watched the Buck Rogers and the Battlestar Galactica back in 1979, 1980, and we watched a whole bunch of things. But Babylon 5 and TNG, so TNG was fantastic. I'm not sure of the exact sequence here. I'm not sure if DS9 started before or after Babylon 5. I didn't look it up. I actually should look it up. But since I was a Trekkie, of course I'm watching DS9. But I do recall, I believe Babylon 5 started like a season or 2 before DS9 showed up. So since it's a Star Trek show, I'm going to get into it because I love TNG. And then I'm watching Babylon 5. I actually taped. I had the VCR, the VHS VCR, and I had one of those fangled ones that you would program the code into so it would tape all the Babylon 5s. And so I had a stack of VHS tapes, even when I moved here, of all the Babylon 5 episodes, first run taped from TV, which I watched a lot. And of course, I got the box set over there on DVD, and there's not a DVD player in the house, but but I have the box set over there too. I adored Babylon 5. I would have to say I have seen the entire season all the way through at least a dozen times. About every year, I'll just put it on. And I'll start from the beginning, and go to the end. The first season, but then it just starts ramping up. The fifth season, but but for me, and this is, I'm going to preface this by saying I don't want to say this. One of the things that Steve Shive said, and it's 100% true, is that when Gene Hackman was making any of his movies, you didn't see him acting in those movies. You felt the character was genuine. That's the character. He wasn't, you don't see him making any slips about his acting. Oh, he's acting there. Oh, that's Gene Hackman acting there, because you think that's the character that he's playing, and he's the character. Star Trek had a lot of that. Star Trek had a lot of really solid acting. I mean, you can go back to Campy Kirk, but whatever. But Picard and Riker, like you felt that these characters were genuine, and when you're watching it, you don't see the people acting. You don't feel like they're, playing a character. The character actually is real on the TV. And Gene Hackman was perfect at that. Gene Hackman was a consummate actor that made acting look effortlessly and 100% believable no matter what he's playing. As I say, when you're watching Lex Luthor in the first movie, the second movie is whatever, but and the fourth movie, whatever. But the first movie, you're watching that, and I felt that's Lex Luthor. That's just, you scratch the surface a little bit. It's like, Otis, you want to see a long arm? You want to see a long arm, Otis? And then because that to me is Lex Luthor, where the plan is the consummate thing that has to happen, and anything that gets in the way of that plan has to be fixed and or eliminated. Like they're driving on the, I think it was the ambulance. They're driving along the highway, and he lets go of the steering wheel to beat up Otis. Right? Like that's his one thought. You screwed up the plan. Not that the thing's going to crash into the barrier and kill everybody. No. Like he is so singularly focused. Lex Luthor is so singularly focused on his plan. That's who Lex Luthor is. He is a complete sociopath. He can fake not a sociopath very, very well. Like that last scene that was cut in the movie, but shows up in the extras when he's playing the piano. He's got the, and then you see Miss Test Bucket being lowered into, why, Lex, why? he's playing the piano. Like the beautiful, not beautiful in the fun sense, but beautiful in the, this guy is, you cannot turn your back on this guy literally ever. You can't do it, because he'll stab you in the back. This shows he's going to give you a buck. I felt it. From the minute he shows up on the screen. I felt it. Like when the detective's trying to get into the door that Otis just went through, and you see Lex watching the monitor, and he's got that little, and he goes flying onto the tracks. I go like, again, bad. Somebody died. Bad. And yet, without any nearly a thought, we go on to the next thought. So I just adored that about Superman. I do Gene Hackman. You believed he was a character, and so I will say this: the acting in Star Trek overall, the acting in Star Trek was much better than the acting in Babylon 5, and that's not to disparage the acting in Babylon 5. I did feel sometimes that they were calling it in, because there was some heavy duty stuff going on in the 5 seasons. But I did feel sometimes that I could see them acting. Now, there was the one scene with Claudia and Zathras, but that was a 5-minute take. So I understood why they were standing still, and it's a one continuous take, which I thought was brilliant. But again, it's not that the acting was subpar or even par. It was still excellent in Babylon 5. For me, the difference between Star Trek and Babylon 5, overall, Star Trek had some very, very, very personally wonderful, moving, emotional episodes. The Visitor in DS9, which is, people keep on saying is the best one. I would say I've City on Forever. There's a whole bunch. But The Inner Light, my personal favorite for that. But the Visitor is better than the Inner Light. But a moving episode where I'm actually not even misty, I'm like that kind of episode. The Visitor is fantastic. If you want to watch 1 hour television, it really has nothing to do with. You can watch the Visitor episode, without knowing anything about Star Trek. Just follow the plot. But I was bawling at the end of it. But that's a standalone episode. It's a standalone episode. There is no repercussions before or after that episode. There is no emotionally invested stuff before or after, which is why I was disappointed with Voyager, because I wanted to be emotionally invested in watching this crew get through 7 seasons and seeing what happens when episode reflects. I mean, they had some casual inferences to previous episodes on all the seasons for all the series, but there was no continuous story arc. And people say, oh, the Dominion War. No, it really wasn't. It was, and again, to me, it was a rip off of Babylon 5 because Babylon 5 was already doing that. And the thing about Babylon 5 is JMS sat down before Babylon 5 and said, this is what's going to happen over the 5 seasons. Bing, bang, bing, 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 boom. That's the story. Now we just have to fill in with episodes. DS9 was not set up to be a serialized show ever. DS9, you watched the first 2 seasons, it had no concept that it was going to be as serialized. It was an episodic show, just like TNG and just like the original series. That's what it was. And then they watched Babylon 5 in the 2nd or 3rd season. They go, holy crap, this is awesome, and we should do Dominion War. So they did, and it was great. Don't get me wrong, the Dominion War was awesome. It was a really good, fantastic, wonderful thing for the franchise. It added that complexity that was never seen in Star Trek before. They had nuance. What's good? What's bad? One of my favorite episodes is when Sisko's talking to his computer, making his log about the Romulan guy that had killed to get the Romulans into the war. Was that ethical or not ethical? I loved that episode. Absolutely adore that episode. That was a fantastic, and then he deletes the whole thing at the end. Fantastic episode. Babylon 5 had that through the entire series. The entire 5 years had that. I was emotionally invested in the story, not just the actors, not just the characters. I was invested from episode 2, like the Gathering. Okay, but after it caught on, and then you get the Sleeping in Light. When they're all, and Sheridan's gone to the rim, and then they're all on the station, and then Garibaldi picks up that drinking because he's an alcoholic. Harks back to the first season. His alcoholism had a huge impact on the entire storyline. Garibaldi, and then he's rubbing the shot glass in his hands, and he puts it down, and then the Doc walks out with Zach who walked out with Delenn. Right, and then they get in the elevator, and then you see JMS turning off the lights, and then the music's swelling. The music again, not Williams' music, but Christopher Frankie's music. The music is swelling, and it's swelling, and then you got Claudia's voiceover. Claudia, just wonderful voiceover, and there are all the different alien races are leaving Babylon 5, and it blows up. Again, it was a textbook, this blow up the station, but the music just set me off today. It was just before I came down here. That's why I came down here to talk about it. 33 minutes to talk about it. Sleeping in Light, the music of the Babylon 5 station being shot down and blowing up, and then all those alien races, and then the voiceover from Claudia. And I don't know the text of Claudia's voiceover, but I listen to it a lot because it's not just Babylon 5 voiceover text. It's life lessons voiceover text. That there's always hope, even for people like us. There's always hope, which is something that is in dire need today. After watching the news today, there is always hope. And that was Babylon 5. That was the whole theme of the entire franchise. There's always hope in the darkest hour, the Shadow War. Oh my God, and President Clark. Oh my God. Like, if you can't see the analogies, almost textbook. JMS wrote this back in the 80s and 90s. If you can't see the textbook 1-to-1 ratio between President Clark and that doofus down there right now, today, I don't want to talk to you. I honest to God don't want to talk to you. If you are pro-Trump, get off my stream right now. After today, get out. I'm Cary Grant now. Get out. After today, what he did to Zelensky, anyway, this wasn't the topic. But anyway, so I'm watching Babylon. I'm listening to the Babylon 5 suite, and I was like, ah! So I wanted to come and tell you about it. That's it. So that's the whole kit and caboodle. It was really moving today, and I think as the more chaotic the world gets, the more emotional I get, because again, I'm a man of justice. Like justice seems to be a overactive thing on my part. That so I get emotional, and it's gonna stop because it's like whatever now. Anyway, that's it. That's all. That's the entire video. I had more to talk about, but too many tangents to talk about. So I'll talk to you guys soon.